All right, so what we're going to do now is take a look at something, again, that we've been looking at before, but we're going to bring it all together. It's something called the market. Now, again, the market is made up, as we've talked about in Markets Work Well, is made up of supply, again, that comes from the production sector, and then demand, which comes from the consumer sector. So we've talked about these. One of the things I want to focus on is the importance of demand, because demand is key in the marketplace. Of course, supply is as well, but we've talked through it, I think, as well. But let's focus on demand for now. So when we look at demand, remember you've got two types of demand that we talked about. You've got elastic demand, and then you've got inelastic demand, and those are the two types. And so they have to do with the, again, slope of the demand curve. And so if you have an inelastic type of demand, then you can see that's going to become elastic type of demand, that's going to become very flat. And so you end up with, of course, this idea of high prices, but you have this large area of sensitivity. Inelastic demand is going to be very straight up and down. And so that's the elastic type. This is the inelastic type. And that's going to be very straight up and down, typically low prices like we talked about before. So as elasticity is reviewed here, you can see that it impacts the market a little bit. So let's do an example of elasticity of demand. So if you have a situation where the price of a commodity is, let's go with milk, and it's $3 a gallon, and you have a quantity that is consumed, and let's just say it's 1,000 units in the marketplace. And this is kind of what we would call situation number one. So this is the beginning, usually at some date, let's say 1/1/18. So when we started the year, that's the situation we had in the market. Now, when you move through later in the year and you look at 8/1, this is the situation number two now. You've got a different deal. You've got the price of $2.90 a gallon on average. And then the question is, that supply, or quantity demanded, I should say, has gone to 1,200 units. So the question is, what kind of demand is this? And so that is what we're looking at here. Now, there's several elasticity of demand formulas. The one that I use is usually called a midpoint. So what it does is it takes the quantity from quantity 2, and it takes these and divides these by the sum of Q1 plus Q2. And so it ends up with kind of what changed based on what was the total. Same thing's true on price. So P1 minus P2 again, divided by P1 plus P2. And then that would be our plug-in. So let's just plug in these things and see. Now, again, there are several types of elasticity of demand formulas here. This is just one called midpoint. All right, so let's take a look at what happened with quantity. Well, quantity went from 1,000 units to, it looks like 1,200 units, and that is an answer. And then we're going to divide this by the total of those, which is 2,200 units. So now we come across here on the bottom, and so what happened with price at this time? Well, price was $3, and it went to $2.90. And then if we look at what it was in total, it was $5.90. And so we'll continue to work our way down through here. So let's simplify this a little bit, and let me do some of the math here. So 1,000 minus 1,200 is, of course, 200. Divided by 2,200, and so that's going to equal a minus 0.09 divided by what happened with price. Well, price changed by a positive, so it was 3 minus 2.9, and so that's going to be 0.1 divided by 5.9, which is the total there. So 0.1 divided by 5.9 equals 0.02. If we move across here and look at this, we would see that, well, looks like, of course, percent change in quantity. Remember, that is on the top, and percent change in price is on the bottom. Which one is the large one here? Well, it would be quantity. So quantity changed a ton, 0.09, when price changed just a little bit. Another way you can look at this is actually when you come down, that's usually a 9% move, and that's a 2% move. So if you go ahead and do the math across here, we're talking about 0.09 divided by 0.02. The answer is 4.5. That is greater than 1. So our answer is that this must be elastic type of demand. In this case, it's for milk. And so elastic demand for milk means that in the market, any price move down is going to cause quantity to shoot way up. Any price move up is going to also cause quantity to go really far down. So in our case, and by the way, I should go back in here in these formulas, you always take the absolute value of this. Every time you look at demand, the answer is always going to be a negative. So we drop that negative, that's why we're looking at this. Remember, it's always going to be a negative on one of these, either two sides. So you're always going to end up with a negative answer. So by taking the absolute value, we can go ahead and get rid of this negative because it's always going to be that. So that's how we end up with it greater than 1. Of course, if you have a situation where the price goes up, we're probably going to see quantity not go up but go down, and that's going to end up creating a different answer, but it's still going to be elastic, meaning we're sensitive to price. So what does this mean about a market? If you see prices go up, in other words, somehow production costs go up, then you're likely going to see a big drop in quantity, and that's going to create an issue in the market. And so understanding elasticity of demand is going to help us understand our focus for this class, which is trying to get a hold of price. So this idea of elasticity of demand is a great example of how it could affect price. And this is what we see in the market. So if you're looking at milk prices, and you go ahead and try to do some research in what consumers are paying, what they're paying over time, might create some problems. So if we see a price increase, quantity goes down a lot. What does that mean? Well, that means that we might end up with a surplus because consumers are going to want to buy a lot less. And so then buying a lot less means a surplus. What does surplus mean in the market? It won't happen right away, but eventually you're going to end up with probably a price drop. And that's going to end up in the market creating some issues. This price drop will be kind of probably like step number 1. But if the price drops, what's going to happen later? Well, at some point, the price keeps dropping. That means that we're going to end up with people that go out of business. The dairies can't keep producing. So eventually, what might happen is the price would probably start to increase because once it gets so cheap, people want to buy more of it. That bids it up. And so this vicious cycle just never stops. That's the idea. And the reason why is that these things that we're talking about, write this a little bit better, these things we're talking about are commodities.